Okay, hi everyone. This is my video discussion for the violence in the Southwest discussion. So, question one: what does the case of Thomas Johnson say about race in New Mexico? Highlight at least three major issues that explain the geography of race in New Mexico. What new things did you learn? The Thomas Johnson case is an interesting one. From the beginning, there are a lot of assumptions about Johnson's being guilty of his alleged crimes. The investigators of the crimes against Miss Jaramillo and Mr. Churchill. Because Johnson had been previously incarcerated and was known as a Negro drifter, it seemed as though he was automatically deemed guilty for the sexual assault and murder of Miss Jaramillo. Even though Johnson had admitted to the assault of Churchill, the police believed that Johnson was using the alleged crimes against Churchill as an alibi for the murder and sexual assault of Miss Jaramillo. One of the major issues in this case, at least when it came to trying to find a suitable place to jail Johnson, Santa Fe jail was considered to be too insecure to hold him, and because Santa Fe wanted to rid the city of, quote, undesirable people, unquote, which could easily translate into not wanting black people, especially a black person such as Johnson in Santa Fe, and to the point that they had to imprison Johnson in the state penitentiary because he had a history of committing crimes previously, and I guess they thought because he was an ex-convict and because of the two murders, murder and attempted murder. I think he died afterwards, but at the time that he was jailed, it was still considered, I guess, attempted murder and sexual assault. That the Santa Fe jail was considered too insecure to hold him, which is why they had to put him in the state penitentiary. And also it was because Miss Jaramillo's grandfather was very powerful in the Spanish community in Santa Fe. And it pretty much, the media sensationalized the case that Johnson had taken away this beautiful young Spanish woman away from her Spanish community, and it was seen as a violation of the sanctity of the Santa Fe Spanish community. The reaction of the media and the Spanish community of Santa Fe shows that there's a clear separation between black and Spanish communities in New Mexico during that time. The murder of a promising young Spanish woman by a black ex-convict was sensationalized in the media because of the relationship between black and Hispanic communities in New Mexico. The new thing that I learned was just simply learning about Johnson's case and how it affected the racial relations in New Mexico. So question 2, what role has violence played in the racial formation of New Mexico and Oklahoma? What are the similarities that you see between the two contexts? There are many reasons as to why and how a city develops, but in New Mexico and Oklahoma, it seems as though violence is what played a significant role in the way in which the city was sectioned off based on race. Take, for example, the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921, the destruction of the affluent black neighborhood Greenwood due to the alleged rape of Sarah Page, a white woman, by Dick Rowland, a black man. Even though this alleged rape was the catalyst for the destruction of Greenwood, many Tulsa whites were jealous of the prosperity and affluence that black people of Greenwood enjoyed and wanted to, quote, put them in their place. This wave of white terrorism was what caused over 9,000 black people to become homeless in Tulsa. Because there was so much wealth that was circulating in Greenwood, this threatened the economy of the white community in Tulsa. The neighborhood of Greenwood was so affluent that even though the state of Oklahoma only had 2 airports, but at the same time, 6 black families had their own airplanes. Due to the terrorism that black people faced at the hands of white people, the segregation between white and black people became even more so, with the black dollar being able to circulate throughout Greenwood for a little over a year before it had to leave and enter the white economy. There was similar violence between black and white people in New Mexico because there was such a rich tri-culture, and in this particular aspect, we're talking about a tri-culture between Hispanic people, white people, and indigenous people, that there was such a rich history of the tri-culture in New Mexico. It was hard for black people to be accepted into New Mexico itself and into New Mexican culture. There were strong communities of Hispanic, indigenous, and white people, but that was not the case with black people. there were small black communities throughout New Mexico, but they didn't have the numbers or cultural strength that other communities have, thus making it easier to commit acts of violence towards them. Take the way that black people were policed in Santa Fe, which affected the way that the Johnson case was sensationalized in the media. Johnson had been convicted of numerous crimes, such as burglary, but nothing so intense that the local Santa Fe jail could not be able to hold him. Just as how assumptions were made against Johnson because of his blackness, the police and New Mexican authorities made assumptions about other black people and policed them heavily and made laws and such like that to make sure that they weren't able to like mix a whole lot and live in different areas where other ethnic groups lived. There were clear separations as to where black people were allowed to exist and live in Santa Fe and New Mexico itself as just a state, because black people were considered to be undesirable, and thus it was difficult to live in New Mexico and make a prosperous life as a black person in New Mexico. The situations between violence and the way that Oklahoma and New Mexico developed are similar but different. Violence is, of course, violence, but we can easily say that the things that happened in New Mexico were subdued compared to the Tulsa Race Massacre. Black people in Oklahoma had more time to build wealth and create jealousy from white people because of that wealth, while black people in New Mexico had little to no time to build wealth because most ended up in New Mexico because they fled the Jim Crow South and horrific events such as the Tulsa Race Massacre. So, number 3. How can we situate blacks in the tricultural narrative that is so pervasive in New Mexico? It's difficult to situate black people in the tricultural narrative that New Mexico has because compared to indigenous and Hispanic people, our roots are much more fresh. I think that's important to have easy access to knowledge about the history of black people in New Mexico, such as having specials on public broadcasting channels that are posted to YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, such as that, so that you can have people that like to watch TV and that if they want to watch like PBS, because that's public, and pretty much if you have access to television, you're going to have access to PBS even if you don't have like regular cable, right? And also having it posted on social media also makes it easier for like younger people to watch it and learn about it and understand like, oh, there are actually black people in the 1800s, not just like from the 70s till now. It's much more, there's a much longer history than what people think. And most people believe that there weren't, again, like I said, that there weren't black people in New Mexico until the late 20th century, when there's a longer history. I think we just need to make the history of black folks in New Mexico easy to access instead of like only having it in a college class, because even though it's accessible for some to go to college, it's not accessible for all. And I feel like that needs to change to make this knowledge like easy to access, have more books or whichever published that are kind of taught in like public school curriculums and stuff like that that show black people in the Southwest, but especially black people in New Mexico more often, because we don't see that a lot, and that would be a much easier way to get it across to a wider audience. And number 4, what other general reflections do I have? Some general reflections that I have are that pretty much from doing these readings, or that the hardships that black people have faced throughout history really aren't that much different, even when it depends on different regions and different states in America, or just different regions of the world. Black people are pretty much subjugated in similar ways no matter where we live or happen to exist in. So yeah, that's my discussion video. I hope you guys learned something from it and enjoyed watching it. Thank you.